Dear Family is a podcast hosted by Rachel Steinman, a writer, an educator, and a mental health advocate. And Rachel gets us up close and personal, so we feel a strong connection, familiarity, and comfort with her guests. So settle in and join us as we search for true healing and journey with Rachel and her most interesting guests.
Hi there, it's Rachel Steinman, and this episode is called If You Don't Come From a Healthy Family, Make Sure a Healthy Family Comes From You. So just 4 months ago, I launched my Dear Family podcast trailer, and I really had no idea what the journey would be, but I just jumped in head first, trusting that the process would help me figure out self-discovery and I would be open to where I was taken. And my mission was to just let the world know that regardless if you grew up in a home that was shrouded in secrets, or if you or a loved one were experiencing mental health conditions, that you were not alone and that there was real hope, because I found that. And I wanted to share inspirational stories of people just like you who were overcoming obstacles to not just survive, but to thrive. And what ended up happening is not only did I find community with like-minded people like yourselves, and who were searching for mental wellness, but my heart exploded wide open, bigger than I ever could have imagined. And part of that was that, you were reaching out to me and letting me know my message was connecting with you. And honestly, there's nothing better than that. And I was just so humbled to know that you were also examining your own life and your family's life, as well as others. And we were finding sympathy and compassion and love. And, 12 episodes later, numerous 5-star reviews and a new YouTube channel, which we're going to talk about in a second, and a private Dear Family Members Facebook group later, I'm more excited and more invested than ever in getting my message out. So it's kind of hard to believe that in just 12 episodes, we've already discussed addiction, ADHD, homelessness, extreme anxiety, panic attacks, depression, chronic illness, IBD, Crohn's disease, losing a loved one to suicide, suicide attempts, bipolar, imprisonment, psychosis, sexuality, coming out, authenticity, alcoholism, attachment theory, porn addiction, social anxiety, digital detox, learning disabilities, psychosis, mental institutions, unconditional love, abandonment, postpartum depression, bullying, hospice care, ridding stigma and shame, and how to find compassion for yourself and others. And honestly, that was a long list, but it's just the beginning. So when I mentioned to my youngest daughter that it had just been 4 months since my podcast launch, she said, "Really? That's it?" And I knew exactly what she meant, because honestly, it feels like I've been working on this forever. I've been thinking about it and talking about it and just, finding guests, writing scripts, editing, sound design, managing email lists, social channels, marketing, writing, essays, pitching, learning, going to conferences, looking for content to bring to you all, and so much more. But the work I'm putting in is so worthwhile, because yesterday I came across this really great old saying that was attributed to Mark Twain that goes, quote, "The two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why." Well, I'm so grateful to let you know that I have found my why, and I hope that I can encourage you to find yours. But like anything worthwhile, it often takes a lot of work and vulnerability, which leads me to discuss my YouTube channel. So many of you are listening to this as a podcast, but for those of you who have seen my YouTube channel, I'm sure you'll agree I could use some help. I mean, just look at my hair right now. But it's really hard watching myself because I seem to not know where to look. And the past few episodes, or 2 episodes, I said and so way too much. So I also know I can use some help with my hair and makeup, but I'm just the truth is I'm learning, and I've decided to not let my insecurities of putting myself out there for others to criticize me to overtake my bravery. I'm being compassionate with myself. Just like you speak compassionately to others, encourage others, I'm doing the same thing for myself. I'm speaking to myself the way I would give advice to someone else. And I'm giving myself time and room to grow, knowing that, and hopefully I'm going to get better. So this also reminds me of another quote that I saw the other day. It was written on a Post-it at my daughter's school on a bathroom wall, encouraging these young women to look at themselves with, again, compassion and sympathy. And the quote was, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." I think originally that came from Wayne Gretzky, which makes a lot of sense. But I love that. I mean, jump in head first, just like I did with that trailer 4 months ago. And even I go back to only 9 months ago when I published a very personal essay that was called "A Dog Named Prozac." And I was so petrified to share this essay publicly, but I shared it anyway. And my essay pulled back the curtain on the shame and embarrassment I'd felt my entire life over my mom's manic behaviors that resulted in her extramarital affairs, her wacky outfits, her ridiculous vulgarity. I mean, the things that she would say just were beyond me half the time. And a lot of poor choices that she made because she was manic. And it didn't just affect me and my brother and her friends and loved ones around her. It continued and went on to affect her granddaughters, my daughters. And the essay will be linked in the show notes, or if you're reading the essay, you'll see the links. But what I want you to know is that at that point, just, when I was writing about this essay from a time that happened when I was 45 years old, I was on the verge of kicking my mom out of my life forever. But I decided to accompany her to her psychiatrist instead. And I walked out of that doctor's visit truly a changed person. So we had never gone to the doctor together. My mom was 69 and I was 45. And here we are, our first time sitting together in a doctor's office. And as the doctor was looking at my mom and trying to figure out, how to kind of tweak her medication and asking her all these questions, I understood for the very first time that bipolar was a true medical disorder. I mean, she was talking to a man in a lab coat. He was a MD, and he was trying to, figure out how he could help her. And like I said, for the first time in my life, I realized my mom just couldn't snap out of her mental health disorder. This was a true issue that she would be battling her entire life. And I not only, found compassion and forgiveness for my mom, but I found it for myself. And by sharing my truth, whether it's through these podcasts or my writing, I'm so grateful to know that I'm encouraging others to also share their truths. And quite a few of you who have read my essays have said how lucky I am that my mom allows me to tell her story. And please do not get me wrong. I know how lucky I am that my mom is allowing me to share her truth, because this is her truth, but it's also mine. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's no denying that my mom at first was very ashamed of me putting this out publicly about her manic behaviors and the things that she did in the past. But thankfully, she understands the importance of releasing her secrets so that she can get rid of that psychic poison that not only brought her family down, but her as well. And I'm just so grateful that my mom not only gave me her blessing, but was able to understand that she said, if I can help anyone, then I am happy. And I am so happy that my mom feels that way. And I feel the same way, which is why just the other day, a woman who I knew from childhood reached out to me, and we had not connected in decades, but she found me, I want to say through Facebook, and started reading my essays and listening to my podcasts. And she let me know that I inspired her to write about her childhood traumas. And, it made me, just feel like all this hard work is worthwhile. And kind of the funny irony is that she's a therapist and I am not, but my attempt at being fearless and sharing my truth inspired her to go back and write about her painful relationships with her own mother. And she sent me her first draft, and it was so visceral and it was so powerful that I literally, I was shaking. I could feel kind of this catharsis that she must have felt just getting it out on paper, out of her head, right? Like this feeling of being lifted, a weight being lifted off her shoulders. And we spoke, and I was moved to tears. And I just want to thank her for being so vulnerable and open with me. And I want to let you all know that the good news is that mental health is being discussed. We are moving towards more enlightenment. And yes, we have a long way to go to rid the stigma and our biases against the mentally ill, but I'm reading and watching so much great content out there on the subject that I just wanted to share a few things that have captured my attention because I thought you might be interested. So there's this HBO comedy special. It's by a man named Gary Gulman, and it's called The Great Depresh. And there's absolutely no way you're not going to love Gary Gulman after watching his very heartbreaking and yet heartwarming comedy special. And it's about his major depression that put him in a psychiatric hospital in 2017. And because mental illness affects the entire family, I loved how they had his mom on. And she discusses how she never thought he was unhappy because he was always smiling. And that really reminded me of an image that I posted to my Right Now Rachel Facebook page about how there's all these famous celebrities who have huge smiles on their faces, like Robin Williams, Anthony Bourdain, Marilyn Monroe, Chris Farley, and so on. And yet they all suffered from depression. So we need to remember to be kind to everyone because you never know the battle someone is fighting on the inside. And depression does not always look as it seems, or does not always seem as it looks. So back to Gary's special. So he discusses how in the 70s and 80s, which was when I was also growing up, there was no talk of antidepressants, right? The only words he ever heard were, come on, snap out of it, or what do you have to be depressed about? But again, thankfully, I believe, as he does, the discussion is changing, starting with millennials. So Gary worried that if he removed his depression completely, he wouldn't remain funny because he thought contentment was the enemy of comedy. I can say my mom was also afraid to go on antidepressants because she loved her manic highs and thought that her sense of humor and personality would be dulled. But after coming out of the hospital, Gary realized that it was actually the reverse, and that he would take all the side effects of the cocktail of his medications, like, for example, dry mouth, or as he said, his sexual drive, because, he was in a fetal position before that, any day over death, which is sadly where depression can lead. And Gary said something so obvious, yet so poignant, I had to re-listen to it 3 times before I wrote it down. What he said was, they call it suicide, but I think they should call it death from depression. So with anxiety, depression, and suicide on the rise, this is not a laughing matter. And it's one worth remembering that you're not alone if your loved one is suffering, and that you should always reach for help. So another piece of content that I really connected to is Terry Chaney. She is an author who first penned a modern love essay for the New York Times, and it turned into her memoir, Manic, and that turned into a modern love episode on Amazon Prime starring Anne Hathaway. And I watched it last night with Todd and Molly, and we just loved it. But in 2008, Terry Chaney, she went public about her mental illness. She wasn't a writer, she was an attorney. And the essay led to her a new career of her writing this memoir. And I included her memoir in a list that I wrote as one of my first Medium essays about 14 incredible memoirs about mental illness and addiction. It's actually number 4 on my list. And again, that will be linked in the show notes, or like I said, if you're reading the essay, you'll see it there. But Terry is an attractive, highly successful, or I should say she was a highly successful Beverly Hills entertainment lawyer. She's no longer doing that, I believe. But she battled debilitating bipolar and for most of her life, and she never let anyone know. So she would have all of these, and it started really when she was young, and her parents just kind of never understood how to handle it because she also was very high achieving, as often bipolar people are. And it's just really an incredible memoir because you feel that roller coaster ride that she goes on, and she's very honest, and it's just I highly recommend you check out her book. And when I tagged Terry on Twitter initially when I wrote that essay, she friended me on Facebook, and I was so excited about that. And I'm just really happy for her success, and also just the fact that she mentioned how, and you see this in the Amazon Prime series, that the moment she finally was honest with herself and labeled herself bipolar. I know people don't like the word label, but called herself bipolar or said she had bipolar. She reached out back to like old boyfriends and friends, and she found, again, so much compassion and understanding. And it reminds me of my mom, who, when she finally owned her illness and was able to speak her truth, everyone reached out and embraced her and didn't shun her. And it's just very encouraging for you to remember. Another book that I covers the subject of family and mental illness is actually Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney's new book. It's called The Ride of a Lifetime. And so my husband just started a new job at Disney, just as Disney Plus is about to launch. So of course I know who Bob Iger is. But it wasn't until Oprah interviewed him on Super Soul Sunday and said that, she would canvass for him in Iowa at immediately if he decided to run for president, that I decided I had to listen to his book. So I really appreciated how Bob in Ride of a Lifetime says he didn't want to be anything like his bipolar parent, because I can relate to that. But in this case, it was his father. And his father had been frustrated his entire life from all his failures because he was constantly being fired from his severe depression. And another kind of impactful story is that the book begins with the opening scene of him opening Disneyland in mainland China, and how it took, I'm not exactly sure, but maybe something like 17 years to open. And it happened right about when he had the saddest news that ever occurred during his career, when a little boy was killed by an alligator at the Orlando Disney World resort. And just like the image I was talking about earlier with the celebrities with happy faces, Bob mentioned that there was a stark contrast to what everyone saw on the outside as he was presenting this happiest place on earth in China and this big accomplishment, and how terribly sad he felt on the inside. And, he was forced to put on that happy face, even though he just cried his eyes out moments before and lost his contact lenses. And I just, it's just a reminder again that despite, or maybe because of the family, of our families, we can, get past and rise above the chaos to not just survive, but thrive. And also that you really never know what someone is feeling based on how they look on the inside. And the last bit of content that I want to share with you is a memoir that I'm listening to currently, and it's Demi Moore's book called Inside Out. And Demi discusses how she was raised in a home full of secrets about her parents' infidelities and alcoholism, about her mother's repeated attempted suicide attempts, and about how when she was just 15 years old, she was raped by her mother's acquaintance. And, this memoir gives us an inside look into how a mega Hollywood celebrity who is just, we all in the 80s and 90s looked up to and thought, her life was just perfect and beautiful, had to deal with substance abuse battles and ended up having 3 divorces. And it's just another reminder that family trauma and pain does not discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're beautiful, rich, or famous. It doesn't matter your age or your socioeconomic status or your race or your religion. It affects us all. And again, it's just another reminder that, our looks maybe get passed down the family line, but so does generational trauma from unrecognized mental illness and unhealthy relationships. And that can result in self-medication and continued unhealthy coping mechanisms. So it's why more than ever, I believe that sharing our family secrets and discussing mental health struggles is how we're going to cut that generational trauma. And as I've said many times before in the past, we're only as sick as our secrets. So by ridding ourselves of all that burden, so imagine just getting it off your chest, we're getting rid of that weight that those secrets hold, and we can lighten our hearts and we can open our eyes. And I just want to thank you so much to my old and my new friends for sharing their great resources with me. I've been getting so many great emails and texts from you all about, oh, you need to check this out, or have you seen this? And that's really exciting to me because I love that you're thinking of me to share with all of you. And I, again, want to thank you for reading either this essay or listening to this podcast or watching the YouTube video and subscribing and sharing and writing those awesome reviews. And just remind you that to continue this conversation or contribute more ideas, to just join my private Facebook group and become a Dear Family member. And again, the link will be in the show notes. But until next time, I wish you love, happiness, and good mental health always. Take care. This is Rachel Steinman. For more information or to contact me with any questions, comments, or guest ideas, please check out rightnowrachel.com. That's right with a W. Thank you so much for listening, subscribing, and sharing, dear family. And if you found value in what you've just heard, I would love and so appreciate a great review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, I wish you love, happiness, and good mental health.